Hello everyone, my name is Chris, and I am so excited to share with you a deck that I have been loving for a while now, which is Yoshimaru Ever Faithful and Tana the Bloodsower. Yoshimaru is currently placed as one of the top aggro decks in the DC meta right now because of how consistent, effective, and resilient it is. This of course includes the Boros build with Bruce Tarl as a partner, but I will be sharing you the Naya build with the partner being Tana the Bloodsower. Deck game plan. Plan A, Yoshi. Yoshimaru has a powerful ability where every time a legendary permanent would enter the battlefield, you get to place a +1/+1 counter on them. That means this deck is loaded with legendary permanents that would trigger this effect. That includes your creatures, your artifacts, and even your land. The great thing about playing a Yoshi deck is that you will always have a turn 1. That would be Yoshi. If they do not get answered early on, you could easily overrun your opponents quickly with a very big doggo. Plan B, value. Using Yoshi isn't your only win con. Naya has an amazing spread of cards that give you so much value and interaction to any game you play. Much of your creatures create card advantage, either through drawing you more cards, constantly making tokens and growing your board, or messing with the opponent's game state. A lot of Naya builds play the initiative package, which, if remained unchecked, can win you the game all by itself. You also get the benefit of playing great Monarch cards. Both of these are supplemented by the fact that you are playing a creature-heavy deck that allows you to protect and play defense if necessary. With that all out of the way, let's actually talk about what's in these decks. Breakdown of deck components. The threats. Yoshi is very resilient. Even if they are answered in turn 1, either being fatal pushed or mental misstepped, it can easily just come back on turn 3 and just grow big again. When you play this deck, you often go wide, casting cheap and effective creatures that exert pressure on your opponent, all while being able to go tall with Yoshi, as your creatures are often legendaries that are able to pump Yoshi as they enter the battlefield. This is all supplemented by all of the protection you run. That means protection effects like Mother of Runes, Giver of Runes, and Skrelv, and the indestructible effects like Selfless Spirit, Selfless Savior, and Boromir. All of your creatures are impactful one way or another. They impact the board either as an aggro piece, a taxing effect, or a card advantage engine. All of which your opponent needs to answer before it gets out of hand. I also want to highlight some of the big bombs that could just win you the game if you have them at the right time. Minsk and Boo. Need I say more? Being able to get a 4/4 Haste Trample Hamster is already fine for its rate. However, even after being removed, it just comes back with the effect of Minsk. If the opponent decides to deal with Minsk first, then they still have to deal with the hamster afterwards. Questing Beast is such a clean answer against any control deck that has chump blockers, being able to go through them and deal as much damage to the opponent as well as their planeswalkers. Interaction and removal. This deck is packed with great removal pieces. You have cheap and clean answers like Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, and Fateful Absence, and you also get staple removal that is attached to creatures like Fury, Solitude, Skyclave Apparition, and Palace Jailer. We of course also have the benefit of playing burn spells. So we get great removal like Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, and Stomp that could either bolt the bird or go face. My build adds Reprieve, in my opinion one of the strongest cards in your deck. Reprieve is very flexible, being your white counter. You could either return a commander to hand, one of their combo pieces, a big threat that you just do not want to deal with, even a blocker that they may need just so they don't die on board. Most Yoshi builds don't run board wipes, opting to focus more on spot removal and board protection. Not much you can do against balance though. Lastly, we have very strong stacks pieces that heavily affect how our opponent plays against us, like our two Thalias, Janeth Magistrate, and even the Blood Moon package if we're ready to play around them too. Synergies! Yoshi is the epitome of synergy. Any legend can make Yoshi bigger, and some fun cards like Karizev and Minskenbu are able to produce legendary tokens to trigger Yoshi more than once. One of my pet cards, Frodo Baggins, benefit from this as well, as it's only looking for the creature to be legendary, so no need to worry about it being a token. Your deck contains a lot of hasty creatures. So a card like Samut is such a powerful draw engine. Being able to draw immediately if they're unblocked, they can also draw cards from the tokens that come from Adeline or Squee because they enter the field tapped and attacking on the same turn. Ideal keeps. Always having a white source in your opening hand is vital, as you would always want Yoshi to be your turn 1 play. The amount of legends in your opening hand is also a big factor, but not an absolute necessity. There will be times where you just have a bunch of normal lands, removal, and non-legendary creatures, but that can still be a keep if you properly assess your matchup. A typical Yoshi deck would comprise of over 40 legends on average, 9 to 11 being lands, and the rest being other permanent types. That means we would have a 78% chance of getting at least 2 or more legends with mana values 0 to 3 in our opening hand. This is almost guaranteed in 2 out of the 3 games we play. This is vital as your early turns matter the most in the majority of your games. Being able to pump Yoshi at least 3 times can already spell trouble for your opponent. I also want to give a shout out to Neo for helping me with all of this math. Maybe bored. Other ways you could build a deck. There are plenty of sub-themes that you could play around with in the Yoshinaya build. There are token go wide strategies where you could play cards like Baird, Gut, and Brimez, +1/+1 counter synergies with the 2 Ocelots, Lae'zel, and Luminarch Aspirant, and an equipment strategy. So you get to play the Stoneforge package with Embercleave, which adds to the already great spread that you have with Jite and Shadow Spear. You also have the flexibility of playing meta-dependent cards, like Graveyard Hate with Endurance, Scavenging Ooze, and Lion Sash, anti-aggro like Triumph of St. Catherine and Reverend Mantra, and anti-control like Gadok Teague and Voice of Resurgence. There are so much you could play around with these colors, so I suggest always keeping an eye out for the latest deck lists that come out and see how they adapted, developed, and grown within their meta, and just being able to adapt accordingly to what you think is best for your meta. Matchups. So now I want to talk about the various matchups and archetypes that you will be running into and the kind of game plans you could execute for each. Against aggro. So you are also an aggro deck, so racing your opponent is always a valid strategy. However, you also have a lot of tools to be able to stay defensive and stabilize if ever your opponent takes on the role of the aggressor. You have the capability of being patient and allow the aggro deck to lose gas and take over from there once you see that the close is clear. Against control. Often than not, control opponents would keep hands that are able to answer Yoshi early on, because they understand how threatening Yoshi can be if remained unchecked. So always ensure that your hand has creature-based threats to follow Yoshi even if Yoshi is answered, just so you can always keep your foot on the gas and to continue to exert pressure against your opponent. Gaining the initiative and the Monarch early on against the control deck is often backbreaking for them. Their creature count is often low, and the few creatures that they have is easily dealt with any of your answers or can be blocked. So the chances of them taking the initiative from you or the Monarch are very slim, so use that to your advantage. To sum it all up, usually keeping a creature-heavy hand is the safest bet against this matchup. Against Reanimator. You often have great tools to deal with Reanimator decks if you know your meta has a bunch of Reanimator players. These are in the form of either hard Graveyard Hate or hard removal. My suggestion is to stay aggro. They are using a lot of their opening turns to set up their reanimation play, so use that time to your advantage to deal as much damage as you can. And hopefully by the time they get their big threat out, you are able to push through whatever amount of damage you still need to win. Final notes. Never forget your triggers. This deck has a lot of moving parts, from +1/+1 counters being put on Yoshi, the initiative, the Monarch, conditional draw effects, Planeswalker loyalty activations, taxing effects. There's a lot that can be missed. So don't be afraid to slow down, take note of your board state, and keep into account all of the things that you can do on your turn. Putting a die on top of your deck goes a long way to ensure that you are responsible for keeping track and not missing any important, possibly game-winning effects during your turn. Any reason to play Naya over Boros? Consistency would be one of the biggest factors that push people towards playing Bruce as your partner. You have less risk in terms of your mana, and you also have the flexibility of actually playing Bruce in the matchups where you may need him. Don't be afraid to experiment. There will always be new and exciting legendary creatures or legendary permanents that come out in every set. So just be ready to play around and see what works and what doesn't. Lastly, always support your local game stores. Don't be afraid to make friends and always have fun. Thank you so much for watching us here in the Duel Commander PH channel, and I hope you stick around for more content coming up. My name is Chris, and I hope this helps you with your Yoshitana journey. Take care!